Alright, so, continuing on with the tradition of Halloween, that is today, or tonight, wherever you may be, I'm going to be doing a kind of a re-review of a comic I reviewed a while back. It's a very good crossover in my opinion. That crossover being the X-Files 30 Days of Night crossover, which is written by Steve Niles and the guitarist of Tool, Adam Jones, with artwork by Tom Mandrake. Now, this comic, it's actually kind of funny because a year or two before, X-Files was under Wildstorm, which is, of course, a DC sub-company. Wildstorm was doing a few X-Files comics, and now it's kind of funny because X-Files is now under IDW, which is the same thing as 30 Days of Night. So I find it kind of funny that they did this crossover. I almost feel like, yeah, maybe it was testing the waters when Wildstorm went down. Maybe IDW grabbed at the chance to, take the X-Files license. So maybe it was something of that nature. But anyway, so this comic is basically about Mulder and Scully going out to Alaska after a series of bodies are found drained of blood and hung on this post, and it looks like it's been done for a while, and of course it leads to the vampires of 30 Days of Night. Now you're probably wondering, well, where does this tie into in terms of X-Files timeline? This actually is supposedly, according to Niles, he said that this crossover was supposed to take place between season 2 and 3, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And this actually acts as a prequel to the 30 Days of Night comic in and of itself. So, yeah, that was the big thing, is that Steve Niles did say that he had been asked to do crossovers with 30 Days of Night in the past, but he was always kind of like, yeah, I'm not really, it doesn't really make sense, but after, getting the pitch for the X-Files crossover, he was kind of like, yeah, I'll do it. It sounds like a cool idea. I'm pretty sure he got somewhere down the line, Marvel asked if they wanted to do Blade 30 Days of Night, which would have been awesome, but I'm pretty sure he said no to that as well. Anyway, so like I said, this builds like a X-Files series. If you haven't read or, haven't read a lot of the Niles and Ben Templesmith comic of 30 Days of Night, then I feel like you're good with what you got. I feel like it is, if you know 30 Days of Night, then this experience is enhanced for you. But if you haven't, I feel like you can read this without going, okay, I guess I'll have to read, 30 Days of Night. Well, actually, no, I take that back. If you're a diehard 30 Days of Night fan, then you might know some of the other stuff, because I was a little lost and I had to backtrack on a few things as to, oh, those characters are here, oh, that thing is here. So maybe if you're just an X-Files fan, I might say skip this, but if you're a fan of both X-Files and 30 Days of Night, I would highly recommend checking this out on a whole. I think this would be a lot of fun for like a good Halloween read. And I will say this does build like an X-Files episode. This comic book is about 6 issues long, and the story in of itself, like I said, builds like a X-Files story. But here's the thing, here's something I was kind of like, really? Was when they find the first body, they find one of the bodies of the vampires, and it's a little girl, and Scully's trying to rationalize everything she sees. Even when they do an autopsy later on one of the vampires, I'm kind of like, really, Scully? Come on, man. You can't just explain all of what you're seeing here away. And Mulder is already kind of on the idea of, yeah, these things are frickin' vampires, because we know how Mulder is. We also have a pair of new characters in here. One of them who is a rival of Mulder, who has always thought of him like Mulder was this kind of big crackpot, and no one ever should have taken him seriously. How he ever got this high in the FBI was beyond him. But yeah, this guy is a total asshole, and I don't need to go further into what happens to him. I will say, if you did read some of it, he does. I think, if I'm not mistaken, because there's been a lot of comics, I think he does show up again in somewhere in 30 Days of Night, but I can't say for certain, honestly. But I digress. But with this comic, you do feel like, as Steve Niles and Adam Jones did pay attention a lot to the dialogue. Because this does feel like you're hearing Mulder and Scully on a TV episode of them having these conversations, and yeah, it does feel like a horror drama. It does feel it is creepy. There is some serious creepiness going on in this comic. As of course, Steve Niles is best known for doing horror writing. And here's the thing about Niles. I like him as a writer. I think he's a good writer, but he's very hit and miss. He is so hit and miss with me. Like, there was one comic that I just vehemently hated from him. I think it was called Dead of Night, and oh god, that thing was shit. But there are other times, if he hits it, he really hits it. And I think he hits it here with this crossover, because again, this was the thing that really launched his career, was of course this comic book. And again, Steve Niles can be a very hit and miss writer. I think he has, when he misses the mark, he misses the mark. But when he hits it, good lord does he hit it. And I think he hits it here. Because there are some generally creepy moments, especially when they go into the origin of how, go into the origin of how the vampires actually got the huge black ship you see in the comics. That huge big oil tanker. Yeah, and it's a very just kind of disturbing story all the way around. And there's also some great moments here and there. The comic does end with basically going, if you want to read more, go read 30 Days of Night to get the whole story. It does end like that, but it does kind of end like that, but it is kind of an interesting ending. Not to say it's a bad ending, but I just feel like, again, if you're a 30 Days of Night fan, you'll probably get the ending better. I mean, it's been a long time since I've read any of the 30 Days of Night comics, but it's been a while since that. But I pretty much got the gist. But like I said before, maybe you shouldn't read this comic right out the gate. Like, if you're just a X-Files fan, I might say skip this. I mean, this is something, like, if you're a diehard 30 Days of Night fan and X-Files fan, then yeah, go check this out. This actually feels like you could actually put this more with the 30 Days of Night fans, more with X-Files fans, but you can clearly see the love for that Niles and Jones have for the X-Files comic on a whole. You can clearly see that kind of devotion with just the dialogue and how Niles how he writes the dialogue for both Mulder and Scully in this comic, in this 6-part crossover. And when they throw down with the vampires, they're clearly out of their element. They are clearly like, what the fuck do we do? Because these things are vampires. There's also a hilarious scene, which I'll say right here. There's a hilarious scene where the vampires actually attack them while they're on a helicopter, and Mulder grabs a pair of flares and holds them up like a cross, like in of course, the Hammer films and other, films in general, just make a cross. And the vampire gives him this look of, what the fuck are you doing? And just smacks him out of the helicopter. I just found that unintentionally hilarious of how that was put together. I just thought that was just a hilarious scene of Mulder like, back, demon! What the fuck are you doing? Yeah. We do get more of the vampires themselves, where they're trying to... I don't want to spoil their plan, but it does have something to do with something, again, if you've read 30 Days of Night, then you know what they're trying to do. You'll figure out real quick what exactly they're trying to do with the comic on a whole. In the series, I mean. But yeah, once again, if you're a 30 Days of Night fan, you're going to be pleased. If you're an X-Files fan, I don't know if you'll enjoy it. I mean, again, this does feel like... They do feel like it does feel like you're reading a script for an episode. It does... I will say that. It does feel like you're reading a script for an episode of X-Files, but you're gonna get if you're just an X-Files fan reading this crossover, you might get a little confused as to some of the stuff that goes on here with the 30 Days of Night stuff. But yeah, if you enjoy 30 Days of Night and X-Files, I'd say this is a a nice crossover to pick up. It has its tension building. The action scenes are really good. Everyone's in both Mulder and Scully are in character. There's some generally creepy moments, and it's a nice little Halloween read, if I do say so myself. So yeah, once again, so I hope you all enjoyed this little review, and I will see you guys later.